The galaxy was a place of tension and constant war, where ancient empires clashed, and powerful beings held the universe in a grip of fear. Legends were born from the cries of destruction and the victories of those who bent the stars to their will. But amid all the turmoil, there was one entity that stood above the rest, a figure whose very name sent chills through the hearts of all who dared to whisper it. Her name was Calthera, the warlord of the stars. Known across countless worlds for her merciless strength, her mind was as cold and calculating as the vacuum of space itself. She was a conqueror, a destroyer, a force of nature. Her presence alone was enough to make civilizations crumble. But no one knew the truth behind the ruthless mask she wore, the wounds hidden beneath her armor of invincibility. Calthera was feared because she never showed weakness. Her laughter. No one had ever heard it. And yet, somehow, a human would change that, someone who would dare to defy the legend, to bring laughter to the darkest corners of the galaxy. Story part ***. It all began on the crumbling planet of Vantor, a world once rich with thriving cities and lush forests, now reduced to a battlefield. Calthera had arrived, as she had countless times before, to claim the remains of the civilization that had been foolish enough to resist her conquest. Her army of engineered warriors had already wiped out most of the resistance, and the few remaining survivors fled, knowing there was no hope against her. In the midst of the chaos, she stood at the head of her forces, her gleaming armor reflecting the blood-red sky. She surveyed the damage, her eyes cold and calculating. But as she gave the order for the final assault, something caught her attention. A lone figure stood in the distance, unarmed, seemingly undeterred by the impending doom. It was a human. No human had ever dared to stand against her before, let alone appear so calm in the face of her wrath. She narrowed her eyes, watching as the man walked slowly toward her. His appearance was nothing special, tattered clothes, unshaven face, and an air of quiet defiance, but it was his confidence that unnerved her. He didn't even seem to care about the destruction unfolding around him. As the man approached, Calthera's soldiers readied their weapons, but she raised her hand, stopping them. Something about this human was different. She descended from her command platform and approached him, her boots clicking against the cracked stone beneath her feet. "Why do you stand in my path, human?" she asked, her voice cold as the void. The man looked up at her with a bemused smile, his eyes filled with an almost playful glint. "I guess I just don't find you as scary as everyone says you are." Calthera blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. No one had ever spoken to her like that, least of all a human. Her mind reeled, but she remained composed. "You are brave, or foolish. Either way, you will die here." The man chuckled, his laughter like a warm breeze in the midst of a storm. "Maybe. But before I go, I want to ask you something." "Speak," Calthera replied, though she was already growing impatient. "Do you ever laugh?" he asked. Calthera's heart stopped for a brief moment, the question catching her completely off guard. Laughter? She had not laughed in centuries, not since she was a child, before the warlord's mantle had been thrust upon her. Before her, every waking moment had been consumed by the pursuit of power and control. "I do not need to laugh," she said, her voice suddenly tense, betraying a crack in her armor. "Laughter is for those weak enough to forget their purpose." The man smiled, that same odd smile that was starting to irritate her. "I think you're wrong. Laughter is what makes us human. It's what keeps us sane. But maybe you're just too serious to see that." Calthera felt a strange tug in her chest, an emotion she couldn't quite place. She scowled and turned her back to him, signaling for her forces to advance. But before she could move, the man spoke again. "You know, I used to think I was invincible too," he said, his tone no longer challenging, but sincere. "But then I learned something that changed everything. It wasn't strength, or power, or fear that kept me alive, it was finding joy, even in the darkest moments." Calthera turned back to face him, her brow furrowed. "And how did you learn this, joy?" The man shrugged, a look of deep sadness in his eyes. "I had to lose everything first. My family. My home. But then I found something that made me laugh again. Something worth living for. And maybe you need to find that too." Calthera's mind raced, the weight of his words sinking in deeper than she cared to admit. This human, he was unlike any opponent she had ever faced. His confidence was not born of fearlessness, but of something else entirely. His vulnerability, his humanity, was his strength. And then, without warning, he did something that shocked her to her core. He reached out, his hand extending toward her, not in aggression, but in an invitation. "Come on. Let me show you. What do you have to lose?" Calthera stared at the outstretched hand, her heart pounding in her chest. The galaxy had taught her that trust was a weakness, that emotions were a vulnerability to be exploited. And yet, in this moment, she found herself standing at a crossroads between the cold, solitary path she had walked for so long and the unknown, dangerous warmth this man offered. A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep within her. It was small, tentative at first, like a spark that had been buried beneath layers of ice. It was a laugh she hadn't heard in centuries. The sound was strange to her ears, foreign and fragile, like a dream that had been lost to time. The man grinned, his eyes lighting up as if he had just won a great victory. "There you go," he said softly. "That's a start." For the first time in years, Calthera felt something shift inside her. The walls she had built around herself, the fearsome persona she had worn for so long, began to crack. She laughed again, louder this time, the sound echoing across the battlefield. It wasn't just a laugh, it was freedom. And for the first time in her life, Calthera realized that maybe, just maybe, it was okay to be more than a weapon. Maybe there was more to her than the ruthless legend she had become. As the laughter faded, she looked at the human, a new understanding in her eyes. "You have shown me something I never thought possible," she said, her voice softer than it had ever been. "Perhaps. I am not as invincible as I thought." He smiled at her, and for the first time, Calthera felt the weight of the universe not as a burden, but as a challenge that could be faced with more than just fear and power. And so, on that desolate battlefield, a new story began, one not of destruction, but of redemption. For Calthera, the warlord of the stars, had found something far greater than all the empires she had conquered. She had found the courage to laugh, to live, and perhaps, just perhaps, she had found love. The stars would never be the same again.